Just around 24 hours since the 53-man cutdown, what moves have the Philadelphia Eagles made in terms of their practice squad, and who got claimed elsewhere in the NFL? All that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, everyone, to yet another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm your host, as always, Gino Camilleri. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We've been doing this for 5 years, whether you've been with us, one of the everydayers for 1, 10, 100, or 1,200 episodes. We thank you for tuning in for free wherever you get your podcast and on video form on YouTube as well. Yet another day in the National Football League, 11 days away from the regular season, and the Philadelphia Eagles are down to 53 men. And that's what we're going to continue talking about today. But before we do that, this episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Well, when it comes to jobs, the Philadelphia Eagles filled all 53 positions for their roster yesterday. We know that once cutdowns happen, the waiver wire comes and goes. And unlike the typical waiver wire where you have to wait till 4 p.m. when the regular season kicks off, this one happens at noon Eastern, 10 o'clock Mountain Time. So I woke up and I saw this fast fury of moves, and I expected a lot more to happen for the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of guys getting claimed. But I thought they did a great job securing a lot of that talent that we thought would be poached elsewhere when only 2 guys got claimed around the NFL. That's what we're going to talk about in segment 2. But I think the biggest news of the day might be regarding not somebody that was a question mark on the 53-man roster, but one of the guys that this team expects to come in and contribute right away. That's edge rusher Nolan Smith. It looked like he was back at practice healthy today, and that's on top of the news that Haason Reddick got his thumb surgery. He will be back for week 1. Lou and I a week ago, very reactionary. We were in a little bit of a panic mode seeing these moves and seeing guys like Nolan Smith get taken off the field, and Haason Reddick, who has barely seen the field in this preseason, and a couple other guys getting carted off, and Zach McPherson going down with an Achilles, and Sean Bradley seeing his season come to a close. And we're saying, man, we knew that 2022 was an outlier in terms of injuries. But is 2023 going to return to the norm for the Philadelphia Eagles, which seems like Chicken Little, the sky's falling season after season after season in terms of injuries? Well, thankfully, the Eagles are starting to get guys back healthy. It seems like some guys that they were able to stash on the practice squad, some of those wide receivers that suffered some of those hamstring injuries are back practicing as well. Haason Reddick will be back week 1. And Nolan Smith was out there not just doing special teams drills today, but also participating in position groups, partaking in individual groups, and just being out on the field for the Philadelphia Eagles 11 days before the season kicks off, to where you were seeing him walk off the field just in that second preseason game and saying, is there something lingering in that shoulder? Well, hopefully no. Looks like he's back healthy today. Looks like they're going to have a core of this team, probably just about everybody healthy when it comes to the starters come September 10th. And that's what you are going to need. And the way they were able to keep a lot of that depth on this team, and seeing some of the moves that they made yesterday in terms of cutting certain positions, going heavier at certain positions, going lighter at certain positions, it seems that, I would say, especially at linebacker, for example, they trust the guys that they have up top, and they're still trying to figure out a little bit of the back half depth. But when you got guys like Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith who are going to come in and just be a monster, and Jalen Carter and all of these young guys that you've brought in over the last couple of years, to the point where when we saw Kentavious Street on the roster yesterday, we were in shock. We were saying, how did they manage to get this guy on the roster when even guys like Moro Ijomo have played well enough to find their way on the roster? And that's a great problem to have. And outside of Zach, outside of Sean Bradley, who are going to be on season-ending IR, I believe Tyree Cleveland and Trey Sermon will also be on short-term injured reserve, and then they can revert back to the roster. But for now, it doesn't seem like there's any guys that they're going to stash with a phantom injury like they have done in the past. It seems like they have their core ready to roll, fully healthy for the most part, and they were able to keep guys who will be able to be elevated on game day from the practice squad, who some of these names we were saying have a good chance to make the 53, but now you're saying I could see them being promoted in multiple games. But to see the stars back healthy, that's what you need so that the depth players that we're saying are on the practice squad don't have to come out in big games for the Philadelphia Eagles like they did all those years ago when you're seeing guys that come off of the bench and you're saying, who is this creative character? Well, the Eagles don't have guys like that. They actually have a lot of skillful depth this go around. But come 11 days from now, you're going to get the ones out there. They have to be ready to roll. And to see signs like Nolan Smith coming back healthy, to see that offensive line fully healthy, to see the veterans fully healthy, you got to be excited because in 11 days, it's no longer the 2s and 3s that are going to get the TV time. It's the ones, and a lot of ones are going to be out on that football field. But we still got to talk about the practice squad, the guys that are going to help those ones get good looks week in and week out. Who did the Eagles lose? Who were they able to stash? All that and more coming up on the other side of this break. But before we do that, we are back talking about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. It's almost like you go into the draft and it's a crapshoot, but you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Let me tell you, folks, I've been on LinkedIn since I was in college, and I can't tell you how many connections I have gotten out of it. And most recently, it has helped one of my very good friends out because I told him, hey, man, go on LinkedIn, search what kind of jobs you are looking for, and look for the purple hiring frame for small businesses or any business that is hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions. They make it easy to focus on the candidates that you are looking for with the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, everybody, welcome on back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri. As always, 2 more episodes this week. We have a full slate next week. We will be getting into our game week breakdown. We will be back with our crossover editions each and every week. We'll be back with FanDuel Friday, giving you LOE 3, Stock Up, Stock Down, all of our flagship shows. But we still have some housekeeping to take care of. The practice squad. It expanded to 16 spots just a couple years ago, and it was arguably the best thing that could happen in the National Football League, as well as the new rule that you can elevate guys up to 4 times during the season. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, you're saying, man, they're going to get guys like Tarron Jackson probably claimed and Trey Sermon and a bunch of other guys who put together good tape. And you're probably going to say, okay, let's look around and cherry pick the rest of these rosters. Well, come 12 o'clock Eastern, the Philadelphia Eagles didn't just keep a lot of their talent. They might have the best practice squad that we've seen in the last couple of years for Philadelphia. They kept 13 guys who, if you're watching on YouTube, I will be sharing my screen, all of those following along on the airwaves. I will talk it through with you. The Philadelphia Eagles, man, I don't know how this guy, Howie Roseman, continues to do it. I thought for sure you're looking at the defending NFC champion who has a deep roster, maybe even deeper than the one they had last year, and only 2 guys were claimed. Kevon Wallace was claimed by the Arizona Cardinals, and Josh Sills was claimed by the Indianapolis Colts. I'm shocked that that's it. That's everybody that got claimed. Tarron Jackson put together enough good tape over the last couple of years to be on a 53-man roster. Aaron Sipos got cut by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's back. Greg Ward, who I said should be starting for the Tennessee Titans, is also back. So they kept 4 wide receivers, Devon Allen, Britton Covey, Joseph Nada, and Greg Ward, 1 tight end in Brady Russell, a cornerback in Mekhi Gardner, safety in Tristan McCollum, 2 offensive linemen in Julian Good-Jones and Brett Toth, defensive end Tarron Jackson, linebacker Kyron Johnson, inside linebacker Ben Van Sumeren, and punter Aaron Sipos as well, for a grand total of 13, only losing Kevon Wallace and Josh Sills. You still have 3 open spots. I imagine that they're probably going to go out and try and bring in potentially 3 more veterans to put on this roster. There were whispers that there was a 90-man player that is a cornerback for the Chargers that the Eagles had signed. The Eagles haven't made it official yet, but you could look out for that as well. But right now, the way I look at this practice squad and the way it is set up, 1, at wide receiver, they clearly were looking for somebody to challenge Britton Covey for that 5th roster spot. Britton Covey will probably be the one guy who is elevated the most out of this group, in my opinion, on game day, unless they cannot, for the life of them, find a punter, and Aaron Sipos has to be that guy. But right now, I think the Eagles are still trying to find that 5th receiver that they could bring in. They have 4 tight ends on the roster right now, as well as a 5th one in Brady Russell on the practice squad. And they have 4 wide receivers on the practice squad, but they want somebody that they can bring in and be a surefire returner, like Lou and I had mentioned the other day. Is Covey good? Yeah, he might be efficient, but is he explosive? No, not at all. Devon Allen might challenge him on that regard, but right now, there's not really an offensive playmaker in this group that I'm saying, yeah, they should be on the 53-man roster. I think they got it right with the 4 tight ends that they have. I think they got it right with the 4 wide receivers that they kept. And that doesn't keep them from adding even more talent, 3 more open spots. They still are going to have to sign a punter, meaning they're going to have to waive somebody on this active roster. At defensive end, they only kept 1 on the practice squad, which to me, on top of seeing Nolan Smith practicing today and Hassan Riddick being in surgery and being projected to be back healthy by week 1, that they really trust their defensive end group and their edge group to be back 100% healthy, to the point where they're okay with not even bringing Janarius Robinson back. And they're just saying, all right, Tarron Jackson, if we need you down the road. But the guys we have, the 6 deep that we have on the defensive line at the edge group, and the 7 that we have on the interior, that's going to be the group that they want to roll with. They went offensive heavy. Defense, it seems that they really have their core group, and they're not going to go outside of that. There still might be some moving pieces in terms of offense when it comes to the wide receiver position. I don't think running back will be touched. I think they have those 4 guys that they want. You might add an offensive lineman. You might add a practice squad quarterback. But defense is probably where you're going to see some more additions. Maybe you bring in an additional linebacker. Maybe you try and bring in another safety. But right now, the biggest question mark on the roster is who's going to come in and punt for this team. Because Aaron Sipos, your punter last year, the guy's sitting on the practice squad right now. And you have nobody else. There's guys sitting out there. We mentioned Matt Ariza. There's plenty of other veterans that had gotten cut. They have to figure something out, and they have to figure something out soon. Because I don't want to see Aaron Sipos have to punt for this team one more time. But when it's all said and done, I think the Eagles have constructed a very good 53, in total 66-man roster with the 13 that they have on the practice squad. Is losing Kevon Wallace tough? Yeah, it kind of stinks. I thought he played well in the preseason. I would have thought he earned that 53-man roster spot. But it happens. It's the National Football League. He's tied to a previous coaching regime. He's not tied to Nick Sirianni. It's a new defensive coordinator. Seems like Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmonds really have solidified that position, with Justin Evans being your special teams ace. And Josh Sills, it is what it is. He's out of Philadelphia. He had off-field things to really worry about. But you didn't lose the big names, in my opinion. You didn't lose the Eli Ricks because you kept him on the team. You didn't lose the Mario Goodrich because you kept him on the team. You didn't see a guy like Tarron Jackson get claimed or Tarron Johnson. Even Greg Ward is able to come back. And moves like that will pay dividends down the road when in 1, 2, 4, maybe even 6 games, you don't know. One of these guys could get elevated. And heck, it could be Greg Ward to even come and save your season once again. Time is a flat circle in the National Football League, but the Philadelphia Eagles do it right. They got a great roster. 11 days from now, we'll really see how this roster shakes out. But there's one more guy that's not on the Philadelphia Eagles roster that we have to talk about, who once again got cut today. And hopefully this is the last time we have to talk about him. I'll be back to finish up this edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, everyone. Gino Camilleri finishing up this Wednesday edition of LOE. Thank you again for joining us wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube in video form. All right, we have to end this show and hopefully end this entire infamous legacy of what is Jalen Reagor today. This should be the last time we ever talk about him. The Vikings, after yesterday, they were looking into trade partners to try and get out from Jalen Reagor, and it turns out that they went ahead. And today they cut him. Jalen Reagor, former first-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles, cut by the Minnesota Vikings. And you're probably saying, why are we still bringing this up? Well, there was a conditional pick that relied on the outcome of Jalen Reagor's status in 2024 for the Minnesota Vikings. If he caught, I believe, 4 touchdowns and above 500 yards on the season, the Eagles would receive a 2024 4th-round pick. Instead, he is going to get 0 touchdowns and 0 receptions and 0 yards for the Minnesota Vikings, barring a miracle where he gets back onto this roster. And the Philadelphia Eagles are going to walk away with a 2024 5th-round pick in return for Jalen Reagor. That will end the trade tree for Jalen Reagor. They got a pick for him last year. And this probably goes down as one of Howie Roseman's worst picks, if not the worst pick in his tenure. But without Jalen Reagor, do you get Devontae Smith? Without Jalen Reagor, do you get A.J. Brown? Wins and lessons in the National Football League. Jalen Reagor, he is a lesson to not overthink, to not think you are better than everybody in the NFL. Say SEC wide receivers and guys that went against top-level corner talent can play in the National Football League. Jalen Reagor, as they once said in a great movie, Django. In my language, they have a word, Auf Wiedersehen, which of course means I'll see you later. But Mr. Reagor, in fact, I wish to never see you again. And thank goodness I hope to never talk about you again, Jalen Reagor. And that'll do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Short, sweet, and to the point. The Philadelphia Eagles, we are roaring up. We will be getting into game week. That's what we are going to be talking about. The Philadelphia Eagles take on the New England Patriots in their first game. Right now only have 1 quarterback on the active roster. You better hope things don't go down like they did against the San Francisco 49ers in that NFC Championship game, or you might be seeing a running back throw the football in just 11 days from now. But that'll do it for me, Gino Camilleri, here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Thank you to the everydayers for joining us for your first, 10th, 100th, 1200 show. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Thank you for downloading, listening, wherever you get your podcast for free. If you're watching in video form on YouTube, we thank you as well. Make sure you subscribe. That's how we keep the show going. And make sure you tune in tomorrow. Lou and I will be back to talk all things Philadelphia Eagles. Until then, catch us on Twitter. Catch me at GC24_football. Catch my co-host at DiBiase LOE. Follow the mothership at Locked On Birds. Make sure you check out Locked On Phillies right now. Bryce Harper's 300th home run. We got all the Locked On Philly shows. Make sure you tune in each and every day. Until tomorrow, that'll do it for me, Gino Camilleri, signing off. As always, fly, Eagles, fly.